Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, and today I'm going to be talking about the British TV series Urban Gothic, which took as its premise the ambition to take British horror out of the museum and into the city, which I'm pretty sure is a nicer way of saying this is not just some reheated Hammer horror scripts, we promise. The intent is to deliver a fresh, modern take on British horror to go along with the new millennium. We're looking, I think, here at more gender diversity, more ethnic diversity, more LGBTQ representation, more urban environments, to reflect the way that the Britain of the 21st century actually looked. Now, does the show deliver on the implication of something new and different? Well, it's different from Hammer, certainly. There is definitely a focus on urban settings and on stories involving working class or socially disaffected characters, especially teenagers and young adults. In fact, one of the episodes might be described as Grange Hill Goes Slasher Movie. For Americans, I guess substitute Grassy High for Grange Hill, to give you the idea. I guess Saved by the Bell, but less comedic in the first place. And there is a lot more ethnic diversity in this show than anything Hammer ever did. Though, to be clear, that's hardly a high bar. Hammer's casts were very, very white indeed. But of course, the most important question is, was it any good? And the honest answer is, it's very uneven. And that is at least partly because of its structure. Urban Gothic ran for a total of 22 episodes over 2 seasons. And while each of the 2 seasons does ultimately prove to have a loose linking thread to it, it is primarily an anthology series. By this I mean that, like The Outer Limits or The Twilight Zone, each episode is largely standalone and complete within itself, using different characters in different scenarios. Stylistically, it varies widely from episode to episode. Many are traditional scripted dramas, while others are spoof documentaries, game shows, or supposed emergency broadcasts. The quality of the episodes also varies significantly, and overall I think it declines sharply in the second series compared to the first. So let's talk a bit about why I feel the show falls short of its ambitions, and whether there's anything to recommend it. So one problem is that each episode of the show runs 22 minutes, and other than a single 2-parter at the end of Season 2, each is a self-contained story. 22 minutes is a very short amount of time in which to introduce characters, set stakes, and deliver a satisfying conclusion. There's a reason that The Twilight Zone used to have Rod Serling pop out at the start of each episode to give you a brief introductory spiel. It allowed a rapid dump of necessary exposition and scene settings so you could get straight into the story. I think Urban Gothic's decision to avoid using such an obvious narrative crutch is a brave one, but it may have been too brave. Several scripts show promise in their premise, but fall short because they don't really have the time to develop the scenario to the extent it deserved. Other scripts simply feel small and unambitious all along, relying on overly familiar tropes. There's an episode in Season 2, for instance, which is basically just a cut-down version of Light of the Living Dead. And as much as I love George Romero's famous film, I don't need to see an inferior miniaturized copy of it. The second thing is that watching even a few minutes of Urban Gothic will be enough to tell you that the show had very limited financial resources. The sets, the lighting, and the effects are all noticeably on the cheap side. And I suspect that this lack of financial resources was another big factor in the show's episodes falling short of their potential. Not because of the obvious visual production limitations, though they certainly don't help, but because the lack of resourcing probably also extended to pre-production factors such as writing. Almost every episode feels like the scripts could have done with 2 or 3 more drafts to tune them up, or even just to eliminate the most egregious and obvious issues. The end of the Grange Hill episode I mentioned before is a complete mess, for instance. Then there's the Cry Wolf episode, the plot of which is constructed around the lycanthropes exhibiting behaviour that is similar to the traits of lions, even though they're werewolves. I mean, maybe make them explicitly were-lions if you're going to do it, and name it Call of the Wild instead of Cry Wolf. Just a thought. Other times, the "we have no money, so we have to do this as cheaply as possible" seems to have driven the plot right from the start. There's an episode that is literally a bunch of people standing in a warehouse with their hands on the same car. Now, that has production benefits. You can make an episode with basically only one location, very few characters, and almost no need to worry about changing lighting and so on. But it turns out to be a very dull, static scenario to watch. But occasionally, despite the financial and time constraints, Urban Gothic offers up something that actually comes close to fulfilling the show's stated ambition of delivering fresh, modern version of British horror. Season 1's Pineapple Chunks, for instance, is a fun British take on a Stepford Wives-style Too Perfect neighbourhood. I'm not sure I'd call it particularly scary, but it's an enjoyable romp with a likeable cast. I also enjoyed the unapologetic savagery of the Boys Club episode, which an up-and-coming crime lord learns the true cost of joining London's most elite criminal establishment. Generally speaking, I felt that the Season 2 offerings were a little bit less ambitious and a bit weaker than those of the first. But the episode Necromance is pretty good, and the finale two-parter Dollhouse Burns definitely profits from having twice as much time to tell its story it was allowed to all the other scripts. Ultimately, I think Urban Gothic falls short of its ambitions. It's probably only for people who are real horror fiends or who cherry-pick the better episode and avoid the real clangers, because there are some. It's a shame it couldn't quite live up to its ambition, but sometimes things don't. If it sounds like your sort of thing, maybe check it out. Otherwise, I don't think it's going to change your mind. So, next time, we'll look at Ralph Bakshi's third attempt at an animated fantasy epic, the 1983 offering Fire and Ice. We talked about his first effort, Wizards, a few weeks ago, and we're going to skip his second, the 1978 incomplete adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, because basically it's not available on any streaming platform I have. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.